Hi, folks. I just want to give about 10 seconds for a few more people to trickle in. All right, let's get it started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Anna Pham, Director of Content here at Restaurants Canada, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar on Smart Serve certification and AGCO compliance. Begin this presentation from SmartServe Ontario covering certification requirements and operator responsibilities. Following that, we'll be joined by the AGCO for a live Q&A to address your questions about compliance, inspections, and enforcement. I know a ton of you folks have sent through questions beforehand, so thank you for that. And also really happy to have Richard Anderson, Executive Director of SmartServe Ontario, and Adam Strongman, Manager of Compliance Programs here at with us today. So a few housekeeping notes before we begin. Of course, as always, the session will be recorded and will be shared with all registrants following the webinar. And then please submit your questions if you have any throughout the presentation using the Q&A box below, and then we'll answer as many as we can during the live Q&A. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Richard Anderson. Richard leads Ontario's Responsible Alcohol Service Training Program and works closely with industry stakeholders like ourselves here at Restaurants Canada to support educational resources across the province. So Richard, thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Anna. Appreciate it. And I'm glad to be here today with Adam to do a quick review of the SmartServe training. We'll call it a refresher and certainly open to answering any questions. To give you a little background on me, I worked in hospitality for 25 years, licensee for 20 years, been through the inspection process, and of course, trained SmartServe back in the day. So fast forward to today, I can certainly bring a perspective and similar to Adam, who's was a licensee and understands the space. So I want to start by saying thank you. We understand at SmartServe your responsibility and the pressure on you to manage intoxication. And we certainly appreciate the work you do to get people home safe. So thank you for that. So I'm going to move right in. This is a kind of an operational blueprint and a little brief to hospitality leaders and staff. So before I jump right into it, I always like to tell people that SmartServe Ontario is a charity. A lot of people think we are a government agency. So just want to set that straight. So we're a nonprofit. Our sole purpose is education. It's mandatory training for all staff, managers, and owners. And I'll clarify what that means later. And I'm sure if I stray, Adam's going to set me straight later on. We want to ensure there's consistent standards across the province. So we were established in 1995. We've issued over 2 million certificates. We're actually more like 2.5 million right now. And we work with Restaurants Canada and other associations to continue to support them and get our messaging out. SmartServe, as a charity, gives back. One of our biggest give back is through cognitive behavioral therapy and free therapy through Green Shield. And this is available free of charge for anyone that has a SmartServe certification. And I won't get into what's all provided, but needless to say, there's a lot of turnover and probably anxiety in this space, and we wanted to provide some support. We have currently right now over 550,000 active certified SmartServe holders. So it's a wonderful resource, and we encourage you to tell your teams if they need access to it. So I'm going to cover kind of 4 pieces today. One's the biology of the pour, and the grounding service and the course is really around the BAC, and we'll do a refresh on that. The server's toolkit, we have a simple process that I'm going to run through. The compliance reality, and then sustainable compliance. So understanding the pour, I think it's very straightforward. Everyone remembers going through the BAC chart and talking about red light, yellow light, green light. And I think that continues to be what the course is built around, how to determine intoxication. And of course, in the course, we give all kinds of um, real active interactions where you can try to learn and understand. So at the end of the day, BAC is how many milligrams of alcohol is in your blood. We know that in Ontario, the Highway Traffic Act determines intoxication to be 0.05. That's a suspension. And that's kind of the basis of the BAC chart. We talk about how it's metabolized and absorbed at 90% eliminated through the liver. And we've always talked about the average rate of one standard drink per hour. And I will remind you that a standard drink is defined as 1.5 ounces, one 350 milliliter beer, or 9 ounces of wine. And we know that it takes up to 30 minutes for alcohol to reach the brain, thus the delay in monitoring alcohol consumption. So we know that alcohol impacts people differently. And although I don't need to go through them all, we know that fitness level. So I'm an older guy, I might have a few extra pounds. I'm going to get intoxicated faster than a lean, fit individual. And it's all about, uh, total body water, body size and fat, age, female versus male, consume and process alcohol differently, and tolerance. We know there are some people that maybe consume alcohol daily and have a greater tolerance, but it does not mean they're not intoxicated. So it's important to understand that. And again, we list what the standard drink is in the center. Good old green, yellow, red. This has always been the premise of the course. And all those that take SmartServe understand that this is really a good gauge. Obviously, green, you believe it's below 0.05, no signs of intoxication. We talk about it's safe to continue to serve. Yellow, you start to show some signs. And you'll notice we always say assessment, assessment, assessment. The act of SmartServe is to continually assess your patron to determine when you think they've moved from green to yellow or yellow to red. Under yellow, we recommend slow down service, offer food or water or alcohol-free options. When you interact with people, you'll get a gauge on, are they starting to slur? And then 0.0A is legally intoxicated. And, if you're in this industry, I'm sure you've seen intoxication. So there's nothing new there. When we recreated the course about 5-6 years ago, we came up with the simple process on continual assessment. So, observe upon arrival, check for signs of intoxication. We know ID is valid. We've checked it. And again, in the course, we talk about ways to validate if you're unsure. M, monitor consumption. So that's continually wandering by, checking in on the patron, making sure everything's okay. P is prevent. So intervene early if you start to see they're getting to the point or they're boisterous or showing signs. L is level, determine level, and that's through the traffic light system. And then E is evaluate. So when they're done and after you've been monitoring them, are they safe to drive? Do you want to call them a cab or an Uber? And you'll note at the end there that we write, make sure you do an incident report. And I know Adam had made a comment to me earlier, policies and procedures are absolutely important to ensure not only compliance, but that you're consistent in your business operation. So any interaction, it's always good to have record of. Yes, unfortunately, it's for perhaps a future issue or interaction. So the compliance reality, who needs certification? So legally, we talk about anyone sells, serves, handles, delivers alcohol. And you can see that the LLCA Act, the certification is non-negotiable. So from the hostess stand to the dining room floor to the bar, if there's an interaction or handling of alcohol, I do know that in the case of maybe someone who stacks the shelves or is a runner, may not necessarily need alcohol. but usually they're working in other areas. And a runner certainly can help identify intoxication to a server. So there's really no points in your business that should not have it. It's all about supporting the team and making decisions to ensure that people are not intoxicated. So now we want to talk a little bit about compliance. And again, I won't go into it too deep because I'm going to let Adam speak to it. But the top three that we've seen, and they may be different in Adam's perspective. So certainly serving outside of legal hours. Obviously, it's 9 a.m. to 2 a.m., Monday to Sunday. Um, you can't sell past 2 a.m. and you have to have any signs of service cleared 45 minutes prior. So there are times, and certainly back when I was doing it, if they came in at 2:15 to do an inspection and there was empty bottles on or alcohol on the tables, that's a no-no. So it's important to abide by that. Secondly, violation is underage and intoxicated sale. Um, Again, 19 plus. If you're a restaurant that lets underagers in, it's important uh, that you continue to manage that and look for signs of intoxication and determine if you want to serve them. Relying on front door security without verifying ID at the bar or ignoring duty of care of your regular guests is really important. And third, exceeding capacity. This is more likely a nightclub kind of approach. And we know that it's much more difficult to monitor your patron if it's a nightclub kind of scenario. But it's important that you don't exceed. And we always say the exception on duty AGCO inspector, police, firefighters shall always be granted access um, to your facility. So let's talk about liability. We know that unfortunately runs our world, and we know the costs of insurance and liability are pretty extensive, and certainly in the restaurant space, it's quite expensive. So your liability and duty of care. So an establishment has a strict duty of care to protect intoxicated guests, and that's from injuring themselves or others. So you are legally responsible for a guest until they're no longer intoxicated. And even after they leave. So even in the training, there are instances where you put someone in a cab and that individual got home and didn't go in the house or ended up getting into the car. There's still a responsibility there. And I know courts could assign a percentage. And so we always advise you to manage that the best you can. So what is your line of defense? So we talked about incident reports, writing down details. It's important if it leads to an inspection or violence and the police are called, if you arrange transportation, if a minor presents false ID, or if you ask a guest to leave or refuse service. So it's always important to document these things and keep a really good logbook in the business operation. Certainly in my day, we used to have a detailed log of the evening's events. And then when the day manager came in the next day, they could review what happened and know if they needed to be proactive or be aware of any potential issue. So the liability triangle, who pays the price? So what happens when uncertified staff serve alcohol or duty of care is ignored? So civil liability means the individual can take you to court and sue you for damages. So it's not criminal. You're not going to have a criminal record. This tends to be the biggest challenge that licensees face today. So the server, the manager, and the licensee could all be charged or be served. And it's vicarious liability. So even if a server pours the drink, the manager who overrides a refusal or ignores intoxication can be held civilly liable. And again, we see to this day a lot of that. Criminal liability, in this case, the server, please charge for serving minor or contributing to incidents causing severe harm or death. That's through police. And then the AGCO has the ability of, charging, not criminally, but the licensee and can issue penalties. And again, I'm sure that Adam can speak to that. So AGCO expectations, consequences of non-compliance. The AGCO enforces the Liquor License and Control Act. Their expectation is absolute compliance. And the registrar standards have changed considerably over the last 5, 6 years under the current government, where they have, modernized alcohol as far as sales and service. So, what is the cost of failed inspections? So, there's fines and monetary penalties, significant financial strike against the business for regulatory breaches. So, you hear of suspensions, businesses that are closed for 10, 15, 20, 30 days. So, it's important to know that it can impact you financially. We talk about suspensions, shutdowns, destroys revenue and reputation, and revocation. Again, in worst case scenarios, the AGCO can remove it. And again, we note on the bottom, don't deny access to an inspector. They carry very clear identification. So shouldn't be anything to worry about there. So one question I was asked leading into it is, what if I need emergency coverage? And we understand that in the restaurant business, you have to make decisions quickly on the fly if a staff member doesn't show up. So a question is, can an uncertified staff member cover a shift? So I'm going to say absolutely no, because that's what the rules and regs say. But again, I'm going to let Adam weigh into that afterwards. So if we go by the LCA, it makes no exceptions for emergencies or just one. SmartServe, of course, is offered 24/7 online. If you're in a bind, you could have someone take it and be ready to go. The negative outcome is if an uncertified employee takes an order, carries a tray, rings up a sale, then that is the breach and could lead to some problems if an inspector were to become aware or happen to show up. So I think it's important that that's not a good practice, and you will take a risk to do that. So sustainable compliance, denying entry and removing guests. So, it is your obligation to deny entry. And we know every day that guests don't understand your responsibility, and they don't understand duty of care. They don't understand the law around responsible alcohol. So they take great offense when you deny them. They take great offense when you cut them off. So that's where your role is so appreciated, because there's difficult conversations. So again, you must deny entry if they're showing signs of intoxication. You must deny entry to anyone who's been barred before. So if you've barred someone from your establishment, and this is on the same day, then you should continue to not let them in. And of course, we talk about capacity. On the floor, removing a guest is one of the most difficult things to do. And again, most restaurants don't have to deal with that, but it does occur. So of course, we don't just throw them out. That's your duty of care responsibility. So you remove them from the license area, ensure they remain safe, make arrangements to get them home. And certainly if there's a violent scenario or you're not feeling comfortable in doing it, you have the ability to call police and ask them to support you in helping remove the patron. So the other question around sustainable compliance is managing turnover and training. So we know that turnover is high in hospitality, and I'm not going to speak to what's the best way to stop turnover, but what I am going to say is, as a hiring manager, it's important for you to ensure that your employees are SmartServe certified. Ask for a copy of their certificate. And the one thing I'm going to flag here today is there's more and more fraudulent certificates out there than ever. And my hope in the future is to allow you to access our website, enter in a certificate number. In the meantime, I would highly encourage you to call our office if you're unsure, if something doesn't make sense. if the certificate doesn't seem real in your opinion. When in doubt, call us. We're happy to validate that it's a legitimate one. So prerequisite in hiring, make SmartServe certification non-negotiable. We know nowadays people typically show up for interviews and they have their SmartServe. 18 plus rule. Remember, you can't handle, sell, serve unless you're 18 plus. Now, I will get Adam to clarify because this is a bit gray, but if you are under 18 or you're a hostess or you can clear tables, I believe you are given the ability to remove empty bottles. And in the past, it wasn't that way if you were touching empty alcohol containers. So that'll be something for me to clearly understand. House policies, I've talked about them a couple of times. Develop explicit policies, how staff handle guests, how to stop service, as well as all your other policies around, serving people, et cetera. So it's important that they have it and that they sign off on it. So the bottom line, uncertified employee is a liability, and you can't afford it no matter how busy you get. So the operational blueprint final assessment, so we've talked about BAC, dictates the rules. If you can count drinks, great, and constantly assess physical signs. Then we have the traffic light and simple system, which helps you from the moment they arrive to their safe departure. The law is absolute. There's no emergency exceptions. Host, runners, and cashiers must be certified, and the liability is real. So protect yourself, your guests, and always uphold your responsibility and duty of care. So safe and responsible starts with you. That's it for the webinar from me. And thanks. Hopefully, I've given you some good advice here. Now I'd like to invite Adam to join us and Anna, who's going to continue.
Thank you so much, Richard. And a lot of information to take in, of course, and folks always encouraged to chat to your team about refreshing their SmartServe knowledge. So I'm going to dive into a few questions that were sent ahead and also just some things that kind of popped into my head as well. Richard, you had mentioned that there's been an increase in, I guess, fraud for certification.
Yes.
If an inspector comes in, are digital copies, acceptable for presenting to inspectors?
So yes, and I'll let Adam kind of respond to how AGCO can verify valid certification.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll say thank you for having me, both Richard and Anna in Restaurants Canada. It's nice to be invited to these things. So thank you for having me, and nice to meet you all that are on the call. Yes, inspectors will accept the digital versions of the card. Even sometimes there's some licensees like to keep photocopies or records. They print them out and keep them in a file folder. And the inspectors will always look at those. In a lot of cases, how Richard was speaking about earlier about eventually maybe in the future, a licensee would have access to verify whether an employee SmartServe that they have provided is actually valid or not. And in lieu of that, placing a call to SmartServe to verify if it's an actual valid certificate. The inspectors do have access to the system, so inspectors sometimes will actually take a look at the SmartServe that has been provided, and then go look in the system themselves to make sure that it's active and it's an actual copy of their certification. So copies of certifications are fine, and then obviously the digital copies are fine.
That's great. Thanks, Adam. So Richard, you did touch on, high turnover and staffing as well. And Adam, this is something that you and I had spoken about before we hopped on to this presentation. Do you have any advice or further recommendation for operators on, how to stay compliant year round? And further, to add a second question to that, that also just popped into my head as well is if it just so happens that people are short-staffed and an uncertified employee serves alcohol, who is ultimately responsible in that scenario?
So the first part was around retention, I believe you said. So good operators tend to have a daily scrum with their team. They may pick a topic each day. They may have internal training that has a pop-up daily. So I've, interacted with owners who say, we get together and each day we discuss a topic before, evening service or whatever. And we highlight, remember the BAC chart, or, what do you do if you're in this situation? So I think, around education is if you keep reinforcing and have a topic each day before a shift starts, that can only be helpful. Some organizations have internal training where there's a pop-up each day for the servers. So outside of, having, following your house policies and, doing reminders each day, that's an important part of keeping everybody focused on responsible service.
And over to you, Adam.
Yeah, the only thing I would add for that is, when it comes to compliance is, obviously ensuring that you hire individuals that have taken the board approved certified program and they're well trained. If you have, from experience from when I was in the industry or prior to 2005 when I joined the AGCO, a good management structure, and I know that differs. So depending on the size of your operation, whether it's a franchise or significant management, and if you're a sole proprietor with a restaurant, obviously it's often the manager is the owner and is the only manager, but as long as you have good management and a good training program and a good set of policy and procedures, turnover is going to happen. People are going to come and go. But as you rehire, if you have that good management structure with those policies and procedures and good training, then they can just step in and, hopefully your operation will stay seamless.
Mm-hmm. And just the second part of the question as well. So in the off chance that an uncertified employee does serve alcohol, who is ultimately responsible in that scenario?
So it's the licensee that's responsible. So with all the infractions, with all the violations and all the breaches of the standards, when it comes to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, the responsible person is the licensee. We hold the licensee responsible for any infractions or violations. When it comes to smart serve and when it comes to board certified training, and you mentioned the emergency situations, the standard states that prior a certificate course has to be taken. So SmartServe has to be acquired before, like Richard was saying, the sale and service or participating in sale and service. And that's intentional. If you'll remember, some of you will remember many years ago, it used to be 60 days that you could have the time to take and acquire the proper certification from SmartServe, and that was changed intentionally to prior. So that is the standard. Again, going back to when I was in the industry in 2005, the people that I worked for, they required everyone in the operation, both the restaurants and the nightclubs that I worked at, to be certified just for those emergency situations. So the requirement is only if you're involved in the sale and service of alcohol, like Richard had on that one slide where he showed you what it looked like to be an inside of the restaurant. But it's not a bad idea. Considering the cost, to just have everyone certified. That way, if there are those cases where, a server doesn't show up or there's an emergency that happens where someone has steps in, then you never have to worry about an inspector walking in and finding someone that's untrained, participating in sale and service of alcohol, because everyone's covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just from the standpoint of somebody who's worked in the industry for many years, starting from just being support staff, I think it goes without saying, very much like tools of the trade, it's just important to set yourself up as well when you step into a new job to be certified so that you don't have to worry about these scenarios as well. I just wanted to circle back a little bit on a comment that you had made, Richard, about, I think you had mentioned there was a little bit of a change on hosts and maybe support staff under 18 that could, in theory, clear empty glasses. And you had mentioned that maybe Adam can speak more on that. Could you, Adam?
Yeah, sure. So at the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, we sometimes use this phrase, the spirit of the legislation or the spirit of the regulations. So, when it comes to licensed premises, no one under the age of 19 can have or consume alcohol. And there's an exemption for those staff that are involved in the sale and service of alcohol that are 18 years old that can be handling alcohol in the courses of their duty, at the workplace. But when it comes to partially consumed drinks or drinks that have maybe a little bit left in the beer bottle or a little bit left in the glass. We don't really view that as a drink. When we think about, dishwashers in the back of house, often those individuals are sometimes, varying ages from 15 to much older. Or bar runners or clearing staff that their sole responsibility is just to remove the dishes that are being used or the glasses at the end of the night on the table, clearing tables. The intention is not, that it would not apply to those individuals if it's, just a little bit of remnants left in the glass. We're not really too particular about that. The more the spirit of legislation is about full bottles or full alcohol in minors either consuming or having that alcohol in their premise.
And really highlighting is it's okay to clear, it's not okay to serve, essentially.
That's right. Correct.
We have somebody in that just provided a live question as well. What are the requirements for catering companies?
So,
So,
yeah, sorry, go ahead,
no,
Adam.
no, you go ahead because I'll speak
Oh,
to the license part. You go ahead.
okay. So certainly depending on the environment they're catering, right? So if they're in a licensed facility or they're using an extension, their staff have to be certified. If it's a special occasion permit, that's a little different. So, they don't necessarily need to have smart serve, but when we circle in the liability issue, if you're doing an SOP on a municipal property that requires everyone to be smart serve, so each municipality in Ontario will have an alcohol policy. The vast majority of them, for their liability, require people to be smart serve trained. So I think at the end of the day, for a caterer, it's important that everyone has smart serve. If you're serving alcohol, absolutely. I think it's just a good practice from a liability perspective.
And Adam, did you want to add anything from your licensee's
No,
point?
no, Richard covered that perfectly. The only thing I'll add is, when it comes to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, our concerns or purview is those with licensed establishments, and therefore, like Richard mentioned, those licensed establishments that have a catering endorsement attached to license, so that allows them the ability to use their license at a location that is, obviously not their restaurant or bar, through the catering endorsement. Almost all the regulations and standards will apply at that location as it would if it was an event being carried out on their liquor license premise.
Yeah, and I think it goes without saying as well that if a catering company works in conjunction with a staffing company, of course, they will make sure that all of their team members are also licensed as well. Kind of moving directions a little bit here. As we know, drinking habits have changed. Cannabis have been introduced into the mix as well. And one question we got through was, are there differences in how staff should approach someone who appears impaired by cannabis versus alcohol?
So the easy, simple answer to that is there's no difference. Intoxication. In the course, we do highlight what the signs of impairment are with cannabis. There's a lot of similarities to alcohol. At the end of the day, as you're letting them in and assessing them, if they seem to be impaired, then you have the ability to deny service. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's alcohol, prescription drugs, legal or illegal drugs. The minute you decide you want to serve them, you now assume responsibility for that individual. So, again, the mantra is intoxication's intoxication. Doesn't really matter what it is.
Great.
100% agree that the legislation was changed back in 2021, I believe. It used to be the wording in the legislation used to be drunkenness, and now it's been changed to intoxication. And just like Richard said, it reflects whether there's intoxication is caused by alcohol alone or a mix of alcohol and drugs, including prescription drugs or drugs alone. All of them fit the definition of intoxication.
Great, noted. Um, last question for you, Adam. Any trends or anything that the AGCO is paying closer attention to nowadays in services that have maybe changed over the last few years?
Oh, I think, like I said, I started here in 2005, and our our model, has always been a focus on public safety. And that's still prevalent today. We have a number of public safety infractions or violations that we tend to look for in almost every inspection, whether it be during the day or at night, but usually at night because that's where the issues seem to be more prevalent. But we're always looking that alcohol is not sold to minors or to people that are intoxicated. Like Richard covered in his presentation. Same with the overcrowding and the sale of service of hours are being adhered to. And then the only other piece that I would add is disorderly behavior. So we're looking for places that are allowing fights to take place or other disorderly conduct to take place. So those are usually what the inspectors are looking for. During the day, obviously, they're coming by at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. Those type of issues are really noted. So then they would take a look at more administrative type of requirements, such as making sure that Sandy's Law is posted, which is the FASD poster with the pregnant lady, that it's posted in the location of where the sale and service is taking place. Records is obviously a big piece for making sure that you have all your purchases of alcohol and be made on license. And other things like smart serve, we'll check and make sure that your employees are smart served, and other maybe other requirements such as menu. And those are type of the things that are typically looked at. But I would say the focus for us is always public safety.
Thank you. And just, in the thoughts of public safety as well, of course, we've seen a huge influx of street festivals, kind of like Ozfest and Due West, where, operators are allowed to serve drinks and alcohol on the street. Are there inspectors that are usually walking around at that time? Is the AGCO working with the BIAs to make sure that the operators are set up? As you know, I guess, you had mentioned fights and whatnot. I want to think that the rambunctiousness of, the street festival can kind of bleed into the operator functioning space as well. Do you have any comments on that?
Yes, inspectors usually hold advanced meetings with BIA, especially for the larger festivals. In the city of Toronto, obviously, Pride and Caravana and Taste of Danforth now that's coming back. Anywhere from the blues festivals and other street festivals. Usually, there's a lot of prior work done by the inspectors, working with the BIAs, working with the people that are involved in festivals. But that could be extended to almost all licensed entities. Inspectors will come out, to any restaurant that asks inspectors to come out and speak to their staff and discuss some issues or concerns, or going over some of the regulations and providing that education. A lot of the times we speak with the large stadiums before their concerts series or before their sports teams, take to the ice or take to the field before a long season. Inspectors will then go and meet with the managements of those stadiums and those teams to discuss compliance. But they're really available, for anyone. So whether you're a large, corporate franchise or an independent restaurant, inspectors will be happy to come and intend to speak with your staff and, go over any issues or go over any education that they may have or questions that they may have.
Amazing. And I want to say that operators can probably reach out to both SmartServe and the AGCO if they have any further questions, or visit both of your websites as well, which we will make sure to include in the recording email that will be sent out as well. I just want to give folks here maybe like a couple of seconds to add in any more questions. Okay, well, again, Richard and Adam, thank you so much. I feel like operators are so in the midst of just running their operations. And oh, somebody just, I think, perhaps sent in a. As a licensee, do we have the authority to administer a breathalyzer? Oh, that's a great question.
I don't know enough about it other than if the person does it willingly, you could try, but there's no legal attachment to you obviously making someone do it. And certainly I wouldn't want to be held by whatever the BAC number is. So, if you want to try it, I can't see that you can't, but I know that what if there's a reading that says they're safe? And yet they're intoxicated and you let them leave. So that would be my perspective. I'm sure Adam may have a different thought.
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I would, from an AGCO perspective, from a governance perspective, I would say, that's a question probably for your independent counsel to answer. But just like Richard outlined there, that's there's a risk there. You provide a breathalyzer test and it does show up that it's fine, and then maybe the integrity of that test is not the same as a police officer's equipment, and there's a whole lot of issues with that. I think with doing that. So my suggestion would be is that if that's something that you wanted to pursue, that you speak with independent counsel, a lawyer, and have that question answered, because I think there's a lot of ramifications there that could go wrong. If that equipment is not correct, or if that breathalyzer wasn't administered correctly, and someone left your establishment that was actually intoxicated, and then something tragic happened. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And then Adam, this is for you. How do we book an AGCO officer visit with our teams?
If you don't know, so there's 115 inspectors across the province of Ontario, and if you haven't been visited by one before, and they haven't left a card behind, so you don't already have a relationship with that inspector, no problem. I believe my contact information is going to be sent out, at some time after this presentation. So feel free to use that contact, and I'll look at the area that you're in. So if you could just provide either the name of your licensed establishment or your license number, that way I can kind of see where you're situated, and then I can get that request into the hands of the right inspectors, and they'll reach out to you to set up any meeting that you may want.
Great, thank you. And yes, you are correct. Your contact information will be in the recording email that we sent after the fact. All right. Again, thank you, Richard and Adam, for spending time with us today. And like I mentioned, operators are so inundated with their day-to-day operations. A refresher is always great, and I hope this inspires operators to go back to their management team and also to their entire team and their lineups, and their meeting notes to make sure that everybody is refreshed. And again, folks, like I'd mentioned, a recording email will be sent through. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach us at webinars@restaurantscanada.org. Otherwise, thank you, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.